At 88 years old, he sits alone in a mansion of Mulholland Drive, the same street where Marlon Brando spent his final years, the same silence, the same emptiness. Friends who knew him in his golden years say he rarely leaves anymore. The curtain stays closed, the phone goes unanswered. The man who once filled every room he walked into, the man with that smile, that laugh, that unforgettable presence has simply disappeared. But here is what makes Jack Nicholson's story unlike any other in Hollywood history. The secret that defined his entire life was not discovered by him. It was discovered by a journalist. A stranger called him on the phone one afternoon and told him something that shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. The woman he had called his sister for 37 years was his mother, and the woman he had called his mother his entire life was his grandmother. Both were already dead. He never got to ask why. This is the story of Jack Nicholson, not the legend, not the Oscar winner, not the Joker or Jack Torrance or Randall McMurphy. The real man, the one Hollywood never showed you. It began in 1937 in Neptune City, New Jersey. A young woman named June Nicholson, just 17 years old, a dancer with dreams of becoming a showgirl, found herself pregnant. The father was a man named Donald Furcello, an Italian-American entertainer who performed under the stage name Donald Rose. There was one problem. Donald was already married to someone else. In 1930s America, an unmarried teenage girl with an illegitimate child faced something close to social destruction. The shame would follow her family for years. So June's mother, a quiet, determined woman named Ethel May, made a decision that would echo for decades. She would raise the baby herself. June would be introduced to the world as the baby's older sister. Ethel May would be the mother, and the truth buried carefully, agreed upon in whispers, would never be spoken of again. The baby was named John Joseph Nicholson. The world would come to know him simply as Jack. He grew up in a small house in New Jersey surrounded by women. Ethel May, whom he called Mom, and June and Lorraine, whom he called his sisters. By all accounts, it was a warm home, a loving home. Ethel May adored him. June, from a careful distance, watched him grow. And Jack, curious, clever, restless little Jack, never questioned any of it. Why would he? This was his family. These were the people who loved him. He had no reason to look any closer. Jack Nicholson was not made for small towns. Even as a teenager, there was something about him, a restlessness, a hunger that the streets of New Jersey could not contain. He was funny in ways that made teachers nervous. He was charming in ways that made girls pay attention. And he was smart in ways that no one quite knew what to do with. At 17, he made the decision that would change everything. He left New Jersey for Los Angeles. Officially, it was to visit his sister June, who had moved to California to pursue her own entertainment career. But somewhere deeper, Jack knew he was running towards something. He just didn't know what yet. In Los Angeles, he found it. He found acting. For the next 10 years, Jack Nicholson did what thousands of young men do every year in Hollywood. He struggled. He took bit parts in low-budget films. He worked as an office boy at MGM. He watched directors walk past him without a second glance. He was rejected so many times that a lesser man would have gone home. He never went home. Because Jack Nicholson had something that could not be taught and could not be faked. He had electricity, a danger, the sense that at any moment something unexpected was about to happen. And in 1969, the world finally noticed. Easy Rider was not supposed to make Jack Nicholson a star. He was a last-minute replacement for another actor. His role, an alcoholic lawyer named George Hanson, was small. He had perhaps 20 minutes of screen time, but 20 minutes was enough. The year the film came out, Jack Nicholson received his first Academy Award nomination. Critics who had never heard his name were suddenly scrambling to find out who he was. The world had the answer instantly. He was the most exciting new face in Hollywood. What followed was one of the greatest runs in the history of American cinema. 5 easy pieces. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Shining, Terms of Endearment, Batman, A Few Good Men, As Good as It Gets, and Chinatown. 3 Academy Awards, 7 Golden Globes, a career that critics ran out of adjectives to describe. He played rebels and maniacs, romantics and villains, men on the edge of breaking and men who had already broken. Every single time you believed him completely. Director after director said the same thing about working with Nicholson, that he never seemed to be acting at all, that the camera simply captured something that was already there. And through all of it, through the award ceremonies and the magazine covers, and the courtside seats at Lakers games, and the parties that went on until dawn, Jack Nicholson carried something with him that no one knew about. A question he had never thought to ask. Who am I really? He was about to find out. It was the summer of 1974. Jack Nicholson was 37 years old. He was one of the biggest stars in the world. His film Chinatown, a dark, twisting mystery about hidden secrets and corrupted families, was about to open in theaters. The irony of what happened next is almost impossible to believe. A researcher from Time magazine was preparing a cover story on Nicholson. While digging through records, birth certificates, family documents, old newspaper archives, they discovered something that didn't add up. The woman listed as Jack Nicholson's mother on official records was not Ethel May. It was June, his sister. The researcher called Jack Nicholson directly to check the information. Jack picked up the phone, and in the space of a single conversation, the ground beneath 37 years of his life simply gave way. He hung up, his hands were shaking. He called his brother-in-law, a man he had always known as Shorty, and demanded to know if it was true. At first, Shorty denied it. Then slowly the silence on the other end of the line said everything. It was true. The woman he had loved as his sister, the woman who had moved to California, who had watched his career with quiet pride, who had always kept a careful, loving distance, had been his mother, and she had died without ever telling him. Ethel May had died without ever telling him. Both of them had taken the secrets to their graves. Jack Nicholson said later, in one of the most raw statements he ever made publicly, "This is the most thing I ever heard." Then he added something that revealed everything about the kind of man he was. "I was very impressed by their ability to keep the secret, if nothing else." Jack Nicholson never publicly fell apart. That was not his way. He processed the revelation privately, quietly, and moved forward, because that was all he knew how to do. He told interviewers he felt no resentment. He said the woman who raised him had done it out of love, not cruelty. He even made dark jokes about it over the years, the way only a man who has truly made peace with something can. But those who knew him closely said something shifted after 1974, something in the way he related to people, to women especially. Jack Nicholson spent the next several decades in a series of intense, passionate, and ultimately broken relationships. Angelica Houston, daughter of the legendary director John Huston, for 17 years. Rebecca Broussard, with whom he had two children, who eventually left him for another man, Lara Flynn Boyle, and others. He was magnetic and generous and impossible to leave. He was also, by many accounts, impossible to truly hold on to. He fathered 6 children by 5 different women. He never remarried after his only marriage ended in 1966. A man who spent the first 37 years of his life not knowing who his own mother was. Is it any surprise that his relationships with women became the great unresolved story of his life? He once said simply, "I would love one last romance." He is 88 years old. He is still waiting. Jack Nicholson made his last film in 2010, How Do You Know? A romantic comedy that came and went without much notice. And then, without announcement, without farewell, Jack Nicholson simply stopped. For years, rumors circulated: memory problems, dementia, depression, a deliberate choice. Nobody knew for certain. And Nicholson, who had always guarded his private life fiercely, said nothing. Friends began to worry. One close friend told reporters Jack doesn't leave his house anymore. Another source described seeing him on his balcony on Mulholland Drive, hair uncombed, unshaven, wearing old clothes, staring out at the city that had made him a legend. They worried, these friends, that he would end up the way Marlon Brando had, alone, isolated, the greatest talent of his generation fading quietly into silence. And here is the detail that stops you cold. Jack Nicholson lives in the same neighborhood as Marlon Brando spent his final years. The same road, the same view of Los Angeles spread out below. Two of the greatest actors who had ever lived. Both are defined by secrets, both retreating, in the end, to the same patch of earth above the city they conquered. In April 2025, Nicholson made a surprise appearance at the SNL 50th anniversary special. The audience erupted. He looked older, slower, but the smile was still there. The eye still had it. And director James L. Brooks told The Hollywood Reporter quietly not long after, "He's reading scripts. He might have one more film left in him." Jack Nicholson turns 89 this April. He lives alone on Mulholland Drive. His children visit, his friends call. The curtains are sometimes open now, sometimes not. He is, by any measure, one of the most successful human beings who ever walked through the doors of a Hollywood studio. 3 Oscars, 64 films, a box office record that is still held. A smile that became one of the most recognizable images in the history of the 20th century, and yet, the question that defines his story is not about any of that. It is the question a journalist asked him on a phone call in the summer of 1974 that undid 37 years in the space of a single sentence. Who is your mother? He never got to ask her himself. He never got to sit across from June Nicholson, the teenage dancer who gave him up, who watched him grow, who loved him from a careful and heartbreaking distance and said the word out loud. Why? Maybe the answer would have changed nothing. Maybe it would have changed everything. What we know is this: the boy from Neptune City, New Jersey, the one raised on a careful lie by women who loved him the only way they knew how, grew up to become the greatest actors of his generation. And somewhere in that dark smile, in that electric unpredictability, in the way Jack Nicholson always seemed to be holding something back just behind his eyes, maybe that is where the secret lived, all along. If Jack Nicholson's story moved you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this.